I stand at the edge of the acacia woodland as the first light of dawn breaks across the East African savannah, my shadow stretching long behind me in the amber glow. I am an African bush elephant, known to science as Loxodonta africana, the largest terrestrial animal alive today, and one of only 3 surviving species in the family Elephantidae within the order Proboscidea. My closest living relative is the African forest elephant, Loxodonta cyclodes, which inhabits the dense equatorial forests of Central and Western Africa. And together, we share this continent with no other elephants, though across the ocean in Asia lives our more distant cousin, Elephas maximus, the Asian elephant. The 3 of us are all that remain of a once diverse lineage that included mammoths, mastodons, and dozens of other proboscideans that roamed every continent except Australia and Antarctica. The distinctions between my species and the forest elephant were debated for decades, but genetic evidence now strongly supports our separation into distinct species. We bush elephants are larger, with outward curving tusks and larger ears, while forest elephants have straighter, downward pointing tusks, more oval ears, and a more compact build suited to navigating dense undergrowth. I am a female, what researchers call a cow, and I stand approximately 3 meters tall at the shoulder, though this measurement varies considerably among individuals and populations. Adult females in my species typically range from 2.4 to 3.4 meters in shoulder height, while adult males, the bulls, can reach 3.2 to 4 meters, with exceptional individuals recorded even taller. My body mass is roughly 3,000 kilograms, but again this figure spans a wide range depending on age, health, and environmental conditions. Adult females commonly weigh between 2,200 and 3,500 kilograms, whereas mature bulls often exceed 4,000 kilograms, and the largest individuals on record have approached 7,000 kilograms. My body is supported by 4 pillar-like legs, each ending in a broad, padded foot that distributes my weight across a surprisingly large surface area, allowing me to walk across soft ground without sinking deeply. The soles of my feet contain a fatty, fibrous cushion that acts as a shock absorber and helps me move with remarkable quiet for an animal of my size. I have 5 toes on each front foot and typically 4 on each hind foot, though the number can vary, and these are encased in thick skin and toenails that require constant wear and maintenance as I travel. My skin is thick, ranging from about 2.5 centimeters on most of my body to as little as 1 centimeter on some areas like the inside of my ears and around my eyes, and it is deeply wrinkled and folded, creating channels and pockets that serve multiple functions. The coloration is typically gray, but the exact shade depends on the soil and dust I coat myself with, so I may appear reddish in areas with iron-rich soils, or nearly brown in regions with clay-heavy earth. My skin is home to a complex ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, and microscopic organisms, and it requires constant maintenance to remain healthy. Despite its thickness, my skin is surprisingly sensitive, capable of detecting the landing of a fly or the brush of a small bird, and it is this sensitivity that drives many of my daily behaviors. I use my trunk to spray myself with dust and mud, creating a protective layer that shields me from the intense equatorial sun, prevents moisture loss, and deters biting insects. The mud dries and cracks, and I will scrape against trees or rocks to remove it along with dead skin, parasites, and debris. This process is not merely grooming but essential thermoregulation, as I lack sweat glands across most of my body and cannot cool myself through perspiration the way many mammals do. My most distinctive feature is my trunk, a fusion of my upper lip and nose that contains no bones but is composed of approximately 40,000 individual muscles, making it one of the most sensitive and versatile appendages in the animal kingdom. I can use my trunk to uproot a tree or to pluck a single blade of grass with equal precision. The trunk serves as my primary tool for feeding, drinking, breathing, smelling, touching, sound production, and social interaction. At the tip are two finger-like projections, sometimes called fingers or processes, which I use with extraordinary dexterity to grasp small objects. Asian elephants have only one such projection, a clear anatomical distinction between our lineages. My trunk can hold roughly 10 liters of water, which I draw up by creating suction, and then squirt into my mouth or spray over my body. I breathe through my trunk, and I can extend it above the water surface when wading in deep rivers, using it as a snorkel. The interior is lined with chemosensory cells that make it an exceptionally powerful olfactory organ, and I frequently lift my trunk into the air, swaying it gently to sample scents carried on the wind. I can detect water sources from kilometers away and identify individual elephants, predators, and the reproductive status of other elephants through scent alone. My ears are enormous, the largest of any living animal, and they serve purposes far beyond hearing. Each ear can measure up to 1.5 meters in length and 1.2 meters in width, though size varies with age and genetics. The thin skin stretched across the ear flaps is rich in blood vessels, and by flapping my ears, I create air movement that cools the blood flowing near the surface before it returns to the core of my body, releasing heat in the process. This is especially important during the hottest parts of the day, and ear flapping increases in frequency when I am active or stressed. The ears also function in visual communication, as I can angle them forward in a threat display, fold them back against my head when running, or extend them fully to make myself appear larger when confronting a rival or predator. My hearing is acute, sensitive to frequencies far below the range of human perception. I can detect infrasound, low-frequency calls below 20 Hz, which travel long distances through the ground and air, allowing communication across many kilometers. These low-frequency vocalizations are central to our social coordination, and I perceive them not only through my ears, but also through vibrations detected by the sensitive skin on my feet and trunk. My tusks are elongated incisor teeth that grow continuously throughout my life, and both males and females in my species typically possess them, though some individuals, particularly females in certain populations, may have very small tusks or be tuskless, a trait that appears to be increasing in frequency in regions where poaching pressure has been intense, as tuskless individuals are more likely to survive to reproduce. My tusks are composed of dentine, the same material as all teeth, and they are covered at the base by a thin layer of enamel that wears away early in life. The tusks grow from deep roots embedded in my skull, and they emerge through openings in the upper jaw. I use my tusks for digging, stripping bark, breaking branches, defense, and social signaling. Each elephant tends to favor one tusk over the other, much as humans favor one hand, and the preferred tusk often shows more wear. The size and shape of tusks vary greatly, with males generally having larger and heavier tusks than females, and individuals in some regions, such as Eastern and Southern Africa, historically had larger tusks than those in Western or Central Africa, though decades of selective poaching have dramatically altered these patterns. The longest tusks reliably recorded exceeded 3 meters in length, but such giants are now exceedingly rare. My teeth are highly specialized for processing fibrous plant material. In addition to the tusks, I have 4 molars at any given time, one in each quadrant of my jaw. These are massive grinding teeth, each weighing several kilograms and composed of multiple ridges of enamel and dentine compressed together, creating a surface ideal for shearing and crushing tough vegetation. As these teeth wear down from constant use, they slowly move forward in the jaw, and eventually the front portions break off and are discarded as new molars emerge from the rear. This process repeats throughout my life, and I will develop 6 sets of molars in total. The final set usually emerges when I am in my 40s, and once these are worn down, typically in my 60s or 70s, I can no longer process food efficiently, leading to malnutrition and death. This dental conveyor system limits my maximum lifespan as effectively as any predator or disease. I am a herbivore, consuming exclusively plant material, and my diet is both diverse and volumetrically immense. Each day I need to ingest roughly 150 kilograms of vegetation, though this amount fluctuates with body size, reproductive status, and the nutritional quality of available forage. I feed for 12 to 18 hours out of every 24-hour period, moving between food sources and balancing my intake of grasses, leaves, bark, roots, fruits, and flowers depending on season and habitat. During the wet season, when grasses are lush and protein-rich, I focus heavily on grazing, using my trunk to pluck grass tufts and beating them against my foreleg to shake off soil before placing them in my mouth. In the dry season, as grasses become withered and less nutritious, I shift to browsing on woody plants, using my tusks to strip bark, my trunk to break branches, and my head and body weight to push over entire trees to access the canopy. This seasonal dietary shift has profound effects on the landscape, as my feeding behavior can transform woodland into grassland or maintain open habitats that would otherwise succeed to dense thickets. My digestive system is relatively inefficient compared to ruminants such as cattle or antelope. I am a hindgut fermenter, meaning that microbial digestion occurs primarily in my cecum and colon, located late in the digestive tract. This allows me to process large volumes of food quickly, but I extract only about 40 to 45% of the energy and nutrients from what I consume, and much of the plant material passes through me in a partially digested state. My dung is fibrous and rich in seeds, and I am an important seed disperser, as many plant species rely on passage through my gut to scarify their seed coats and improve germination rates. I defecate roughly 16 to 18 times per day, producing around 100 kilograms of dung, and this material is exploited by countless insects, birds, and small mammals, as well as contributing organic matter and nutrients back to the soil. Water is essential to my survival, and I must drink regularly, typically once every 1 to 2 days, though I can survive longer if necessary by metabolizing body fat and extracting moisture from vegetation. When I reach a water source, I use my trunk to draw water and squirt it into my mouth, and I can drink more than 100 liters in a single session if I am severely dehydrated. During dry seasons or droughts, water sources may become scarce, and I may dig in dry riverbeds using my tusks, feet, and trunk to excavate wells that reach underground water. These elephant-dug wells are often used by other species, and they can be critical to the survival of entire animal communities during prolonged dry periods. I also have a remarkable memory for the location of water sources, even those that are ephemeral and may only fill once every several years. And this spatial knowledge is passed down through generations within family groups. I am highly social, and the basic unit of elephant society is the family group, led by the oldest and typically largest female, whom researchers call the matriarch. Our family consists of closely related females and their offspring, usually spanning 3 or 4 generations. My mother is the matriarch of our family, and with her are my older sister, my younger brother who is nearing the age when he will leave the group, 2 aunts, and several cousins of various ages, along with an infant niece born just a few months ago. We number approximately 12 individuals, though family size varies widely across populations, with some groups containing only 2 or 3 elephants and others exceeding 20. The bonds between us are strong and enduring, reinforced daily through touch, vocalizations, and coordinated movement. We walk with trunks entwined, rest with bodies touching, and respond immediately to distress calls from any group member. The matriarch is the repository of knowledge accumulated over decades, and her decisions shape our survival. She determines when and where we move, which routes we take during seasonal migrations, where we find water during droughts, and how we respond to threats. Research has demonstrated that families led by older matriarchs have higher survival rates during droughts and other crises, as these experienced leaders possess knowledge of distant resources and rare refuges that younger elephants have not yet encountered. Her authority is not enforced through aggression, but through the deference and trust of the group. And when she dies, her knowledge dies with her unless it has been observed and learned by her daughters and other family members. Leadership typically passes to the next oldest female, often a daughter or sister of the deceased matriarch, though this transition can be complex and sometimes results in family group splitting if multiple females of similar age and experience vie for influence. Males follow a different life trajectory. Young bulls remain with their natal family through adolescence, but as they approach sexual maturity, usually between 10 and 15 years of age, they begin to spend more time at the periphery of the group and eventually leave to join the company of other males or to travel alone. This dispersal is gradual and not marked by aggression, though older females may be less tolerant of maturing males, and the young males themselves seem driven by increasing interest in other elephants outside the family and by the challenges of navigating the adult social landscape. Once independent, males typically form loose associations with other bulls, often aggregating around resource-rich areas or moving together along traditional routes. These male groups, sometimes called bachelor herds, are less stable than family units, with individuals coming and going, but they are not simply random aggregations. Older bulls often associate with younger males, and evidence suggests that these relationships serve a mentoring function, with young bulls learning ranging patterns, dominance behaviors, and social skills from their elders. Adult males grow larger than females and continue growing throughout their lives, whereas females reach their adult size in their 20s. This size dimorphism is linked to reproductive strategy. Males compete for access to reproductive females, and larger body size, larger tusks, and greater strength confer advantages in these contests. Males experience a physiological condition called musth, a period of elevated testosterone and heightened aggression that typically lasts several weeks to several months. During musth, a male secretes strong-smelling fluid from the temporal glands located on the sides of his head between the eye and ear. He dribbles urine continuously. His behavior becomes more assertive and sometimes dangerous, and he actively seeks out reproductive females. Musth is energetically costly and socially risky, as fights between musth males can result in serious injury or death. But males in musth have greatly increased mating success compared to non-musth males. The timing and duration of musth are influenced by age, condition, and social environment, with older, larger males able to maintain musth for longer periods and younger males often suppressing their musth when dominant males are present. Females reach sexual maturity between the ages of 10 and 12, though they may not conceive successfully until several years later, Estrus, the period when a female is receptive to mating, lasts only a few days, and females typically cycle every 14 to 16 weeks if they do not conceive. When a female comes into estrus, she emits low-frequency vocalizations and releases pheromones in her urine and genital secretions that attract males from considerable distances. Multiple males may converge on an estrus female, and competition can be intense. The female often displays some choice in mating partners, though this can be overridden by persistent and dominant males. She may attempt to move away from smaller or younger males, or she may cease resisting when a large male in musth approaches. Mating itself is brief, lasting less than a minute, but a pair may remain in close association for several days, mating multiple times. Gestation is the longest of any mammal, lasting approximately 22 months. This extended period allows for the development of a large, precocial calf capable of keeping up with the family group shortly after birth. When birth approaches, the pregnant female may be accompanied by other adult females, and these attendants often assist during and after delivery by helping to remove the amniotic membrane, stimulating the newborn to breathe, and guarding the vulnerable calf from potential threats. The newborn weighs roughly 100 kilograms and stands about 90 centimeters tall. It is covered in dark, sparse hair, and it is relatively unsteady on its feet for the first hours, but within a day it can walk beside its mother, and within a few days it can keep pace with the family as we move across the landscape. The calf depends entirely on its mother's milk for the first several months of life, suckling frequently throughout the day and night. Elephant milk is rich in fat and nutrients, essential for rapid growth, and the mother's mammary glands are located between her forelegs, a position that allows the calf to nurse while standing beneath her. The calf begins experimenting with solid food within a few months, initially eating its mother's dung to acquire the gut microbes necessary for digesting plant material, and gradually incorporating grasses, leaves, and other vegetation into its diet. Weaning is gradual and may take 2 to 3 years or longer, especially if the mother does not become pregnant again quickly. Throughout this period, the calf remains in constant physical and vocal contact with its mother, learning through observation and imitation the skills necessary for survival. The calf is not raised by its mother alone, but by the entire family group, a system known as allomothering. Aunts, older sisters, and other relatives take an active interest in the calf's welfare, guiding it away from danger, helping it navigate difficult terrain, and retrieving it when it wanders too far. This communal care reduces the burden on the mother and increases the calf's chances of survival, while also providing younger, inexperienced females with practice in calf rearing before they have their own offspring. The infant mortality rate is relatively high, with roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of calves dying before their first birthday due to predation, disease, malnutrition, or accidents. Those that survive the first year have a much better chance of reaching adulthood, though mortality risks remain throughout the juvenile period. Calves are playful and curious, engaging in games that develop motor skills and social competence. They chase each other, spar with mock aggression, practice trunk skills by manipulating objects, and test their strength by pushing against their peers and against inanimate objects like logs and termite mounds. Play often involves splashing in water, rolling in mud, and climbing over recumbent adults who tolerate these antics with patience. Through play, young elephants learn the nuances of social communication, including the meaning of different vocalizations, trunk gestures, and body postures. They learn to interpret the alarm calls of other species, such as the warning bark of a baboon or the alarm snort of an impala, which may signal the presence of a predator. Predation is a reality, especially for calves. Lions are the primary predators of young elephants, and in some regions spotted hyenas and crocodiles also take calves, particularly when they are very young or when environmental conditions such as drought weaken them. A healthy family group can usually defend against predators through coordinated aggression, with adults forming a protective circle around calves and charging at threats. The matriarch's experience is crucial here, as she directs the group's response, deciding whether to flee, stand ground, or attack. Elephants have been documented killing lions, and a determined group of adult elephants is dangerous to any predator. However, when calves become separated from the family, or when the group is weakened by hunger or exhaustion, predation risk increases substantially. Communication among us is complex and multimodal, involving sound, touch, chemical signals, and visual displays. Our vocal repertoire includes rumbles, roars, trumpets, snorts, barks, and cries, each serving different functions and often graded in intensity to convey urgency or emotional state. Rumbles are the most common vocalization, low-frequency calls that can travel several kilometers through the air and even farther through the ground. We produce rumbles in many contexts, including contact calls that maintain cohesion between family members, greeting rumbles when groups reunite after separation, and musk rumbles by males advertising their reproductive state. Females in estrus produce estrus rumbles that attract distant males, and these calls may be repeated over several days. The structure of rumbles, including their frequency, duration, and amplitude, encodes information about the caller's identity, age, sex, and motivational state, and we can distinguish between the calls of familiar and unfamiliar individuals. Infrasound, the low-frequency component of our vocalizations, propagates efficiently over long distances, especially in the cool, still air of early morning and late evening. We use infrasound to coordinate movements across dispersed subgroups, to signal danger, and to maintain social bonds even when visual contact is not possible. Research has revealed that we are sensitive to seismic vibrations transmitted through the ground, and we may detect the footfalls of other elephants, the rumbles of distant thunderstorms, and possibly even predators approaching from beyond our visual range. The mechanisms by which we detect these vibrations are not fully understood, but our large, sensitive footpads and the dense concentration of mechanoreceptors in the skin of our trunk and feet likely play important roles. Tactile communication is pervasive in our social interactions. We greet each other by entwining trunks, a behavior that serves both to exchange chemical information, as the tips of our trunks are chemosensory organs, and to reinforce social bonds. We touch each other's heads, bodies, and genitals in contexts ranging from reassurance to dominance assertion to sexual investigation. Mothers constantly touch their calves, guiding them with gentle trunk nudges, and calves seek contact with their mothers' bodies for comfort and security. When a family member is injured or distressed, others surround the individual, touching and vocalizing, and these responses suggest a capacity for empathy, though attributing emotional states to animals requires caution and must be grounded in observable behavior and neural evidence rather than anthropomorphic assumptions. Elephants have been observed attending to dead and dying companions in ways that suggest recognition of death. We may stand vigil over a dying individual, attempt to lift a fallen elephant with tusks and trunks, cover bodies with vegetation and soil, and return repeatedly to the carcasses of deceased elephants, touching and manipulating the bones, especially the skull and tusks. These behaviors have been documented across many populations and contexts, and while the internal experiences driving them cannot be known with certainty, the behaviors themselves are consistent and distinctive. Elephants also respond to the bones and ivory of unknown elephants, pausing to investigate skeletons encountered during travel, and this generalized interest in elephant remains is unique among non-human animals. Our memory is exceptional, both for spatial information and for social relationships. I remember the locations of water sources, mineral-rich soils, and fruiting trees across a home range that may span hundreds or even thousands of square kilometers. I remember the routes taken during seasonal migrations, the timing of resource availability, and the locations of past dangers. I also remember individual elephants, recognizing family members I have not seen for years and distinguishing between the vocalizations of dozens or even hundreds of different individuals. Research has demonstrated that elephants can recognize and remember human individuals as well, distinguishing between people who pose threats and those who do not, and altering behavior accordingly. This capacity for individual recognition and long-term memory shapes our social structure and survival strategies in profound ways. Our home range varies enormously depending on habitat quality, rainfall patterns, and resource distribution. In productive ecosystems with reliable water and abundant forage, a family may occupy a range of a few hundred square kilometers. In arid or seasonal environments, ranges expand to several thousand square kilometers, and we may undertake long-distance migrations, moving hundreds of kilometers between wet and dry season habitats. These migrations often follow traditional routes used for generations, and they are timed to take advantage of ephemeral resources such as fruiting events or the greening of vegetation after the first rains. The knowledge of these routes and the timing of movements is held primarily by older females, and the loss of knowledgeable matriarchs can disrupt migration patterns and reduce the ability of a population to exploit distant resources. Seasonal movements are not simply responses to immediate resource depletion, but anticipatory strategies based on learned patterns. We may begin moving toward distant wet season ranges before the rains arrive, and we time our arrivals to coincide with peak forage quality. During migration, families may join together temporarily, forming aggregations of 50 to several hundred elephants, especially around key resource points such as large water sources or mineral licks. These gatherings provide opportunities for social interaction between families, including mating, exchange of information, and the formation of higher-order social bonds. Such bonds create a multi-tiered social structure, with families nested within clans, which are nested within populations, all connected through kinship, familiarity, and shared landscape use. Mineral licks and salt deposits are important resources, and we visit them regularly to consume soil rich in sodium, calcium, and other minerals that may be deficient in our plant-based diet. We dig into the soil with our tusks and feet, extracting mineral-rich earth and consuming it, and these excavations can be substantial, creating caves in soft sediments or enlarging natural cavities in rock formations. In some montane regions, elephants have excavated extensive underground networks in search of mineral salts, and these caves are used by other species as well. The consumption of soil, known as geophagy, may also serve to neutralize plant toxins or to supplement gut microbes, though the specific benefits vary by location and individual need. We modify the environment profoundly, and ecologists consider us a keystone species, meaning that our presence and activities have disproportionately large effects on ecosystem structure and function. By pushing over trees, breaking branches, stripping bark, and consuming vast quantities of woody vegetation, we prevent the encroachment of forest into grasslands, maintain open habitats used by grazers, and create mosaics of vegetation types that support high biodiversity. Our dung disperses seeds across the landscape, facilitating plant reproduction and gene flow, and many plant species, including some large fruited trees, depend on us for seed dispersal. Our digging activities create water access points for other animals, and our trails, used repeatedly over decades or centuries, become pathways that channel water flow and shape erosion patterns. However, the ecological role of elephants can shift from beneficial to detrimental when populations are confined to small areas by human land use. In such situations, our impact can become destructive, leading to the loss of tree cover, soil degradation, and declines in other species that depend on the habitats we are altering. This is not a natural dynamic, but a consequence of spatial compression, where elephants that would historically have moved across vast landscapes are restricted to protected areas surrounded by human-dominated lands. Understanding our ecological role, therefore, requires considering not only our behavior, but also the spatial context in which that behavior occurs. We face a complex and evolving relationship with humans, one that has shifted dramatically over the past few centuries. For much of human history, elephants and people coexisted across Africa, with human populations hunting us for meat and ivory, but at scales that did not threaten our overall numbers. This changed with the advent of industrial-scale ivory trade in the 19th and 20th centuries, when demand for ivory in Europe, North America, and Asia drove intensive hunting that reduced elephant populations catastrophically. Millions of elephants were killed, and entire populations were extirpated from vast areas of the continent. The trade was eventually regulated through international agreements, most notably the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which banned the international trade in ivory in 1989. But illegal poaching continues, driven by demand in black markets. The impact of poaching extends beyond direct mortality. Intense hunting alters population structure, removing the oldest and largest individuals who carry the biggest tusks and who hold crucial knowledge for group survival. The loss of matriarchs disrupts family cohesion, reduces reproductive success, and impairs the ability of groups to respond to environmental challenges. In some heavily poached populations, the average age of matriarchs has declined, and family groups are smaller and less stable. Poaching also creates lasting behavioral changes, as elephants in heavily hunted areas become more nocturnal, more aggressive toward humans, and more likely to flee from human presence, even when those humans pose no threat. Some researchers have documented signs of trauma and stress in elephant populations subjected to intense poaching, drawing parallels to post-traumatic stress observed in human populations exposed to violence, though such comparisons must be made carefully and grounded in measurable behavioral and physiological indicators. Beyond poaching, we face threats from habitat loss and fragmentation. Human populations in Africa are growing rapidly, and agricultural expansion, settlement, infrastructure development, and resource extraction are converting elephant habitat to other uses at an accelerating pace. As our range contracts, we come into increasing conflict with people. We raid crops, which provide dense, nutritious food sources that we find highly attractive, and a single night of feeding in a farmer's field can destroy an entire season's harvest. We damage infrastructure, break fences, and occasionally injure or kill people, especially when we feel threatened or when our access to resources is blocked. Humans retaliate by shooting us, poisoning us, or driving us away, and these conflicts are a leading cause of elephant mortality in many regions. Efforts to mitigate human-elephant conflict involve a range of strategies, including physical barriers such as electric fences, which can be effective if properly maintained but are expensive and can restrict our movements, altering traditional ranging patterns and potentially isolating populations. Other approaches include the use of beehive fences, exploiting our aversion to bees, or chili pepper deterrents, which irritate our sensitive trunks, though the effectiveness of these methods varies and they require ongoing maintenance and community engagement. Early warning systems that alert farmers to our approach allow people to take protective actions without harming us, and community-based conservation programs that provide compensation for losses or share benefits from wildlife tourism can reduce hostility toward us, though such programs are complex to implement and depend on sustained funding and equitable governance. Conservation status varies across the continent. The African bush elephant is currently classified by the International Union for Conservation of Nature as endangered, a designation that reflects significant population declines in recent decades. Though this classification is contested, and some populations, particularly in southern Africa, have remained stable or even increased. Reliable population estimates are difficult to obtain, but the best available data suggests that there are approximately 400,000 to 500,000 African bush elephants remaining, down from an estimated several million at the beginning of the 20th century. Distribution is highly uneven, with large populations in countries such as Botswana, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and Kenya, and much smaller, more fragmented populations in West and Central Africa. The forest elephant, now recognized as a separate species, has suffered even more severe declines and is classified as critically endangered, with perhaps fewer than 50,000 individuals remaining. Protected areas, including national parks and reserves, provide critical refuges, but even within these areas we face threats from poaching, inadequate management, and ecological changes such as droughts linked to climate variability. Effective conservation requires not only protecting us within reserves, but also maintaining connectivity between populations, securing corridors that allow us to move between habitat patches, and addressing the underlying drivers of habitat loss and poaching, including poverty, governance failures, and international demand for ivory and other wildlife products. Conservation success stories exist, including populations that have recovered following protection and investment, demonstrating that with adequate resources and political will, elephant populations can be sustained and even restored. There are many misconceptions about elephants that persist in popular culture and even in some scientific discussions. One common myth is that elephants are afraid of mice, a notion with no basis in observed behavior or ecological reality. Another is that elephants go to a specific location to die, the so-called elephant graveyard, which likely arose from observations of elephants congregating near permanent water sources during droughts, where many individuals may die in proximity due to shared resource stress, not because of any intentional journey to a death site. We are also sometimes portrayed as having infallible memory, captured in the phrase "elephants never forget." And while our memory is indeed remarkable, it is not perfect. And like all animals, we are subject to forgetting, error, and the limitations of sensory and cognitive systems shaped by evolution for specific ecological challenges, not for abstract perfection. Another area of misunderstanding concerns intelligence. We are often described as highly intelligent, and by many measures this is accurate. Our brains are the largest of any terrestrial animal, weighing roughly 5 kilograms in an adult, and our cortex is highly convoluted, indicating extensive neural processing capacity. We demonstrate problem-solving abilities, tool use in the form of modified branches used to swat flies or scratch hard-to-reach areas, cooperation in tasks that require coordination, and behavioral flexibility in response to novel challenges. However, intelligence is not a single, easily defined trait, and comparisons across species are fraught with difficulty. What is clear is that we possess cognitive capacities well suited to our ecological and social lives, including long-term memory, spatial reasoning, social cognition, and communication abilities that allow us to navigate a complex and variable world. My daily routine is shaped by the need to balance feeding, drinking, rest, social interaction, and thermoregulation. I wake before dawn, when the air is cool and the light is soft, and I begin feeding almost immediately, plucking grasses or stripping leaves from shrubs. The family moves together, maintaining vocal and physical contact, and the matriarch sets the pace and direction based on her knowledge of the landscape and the season. We walk slowly, pausing frequently to feed, and over the course of the day, we may travel anywhere from a few hundred meters to 20 kilometers or more, depending on the distribution of resources and the need to reach water. As the sun climbs and the temperature rises, I seek shade, often resting beneath large trees or in dense thickets where the canopy blocks the direct sun. During these rest periods, I may doze while standing, a state in which I remain alert to my surroundings but my metabolic rate drops and my muscles relax. True sleep, in which I lie down, occurs primarily at night and lasts only a few hours in total, often broken into shorter bouts. When lying down, I may rest my head on the ground or against a termite mound, and I often change position, shifting from one side to the other. Sleep is a vulnerable time, and the family typically rests together, with at least one individual remaining vigilant. Thermoregulation occupies much of my attention during the heat of the day. In addition to seeking shade and flapping my ears, I coat myself with mud and water whenever possible. After drinking, I often wade into rivers or water holes, submerging as much of my body as the depth allows, and I use my trunk to spray water over my back and sides. I also dust bathe, using my trunk to blow dry soil over my body, and this dust layer provides some protection from the sun and from biting flies, though it is less effective than mud. In the late afternoon, as temperatures begin to drop, activity increases again, and we resume feeding and moving toward the next water source or preferred feeding area. Social interactions occur throughout the day. Calves play in and around the adults, and females engage in frequent touching, vocalizing, and coordinated movement. When two family groups meet, there is often an elaborate greeting ceremony, with members rushing toward each other, rumbling loudly, entwining trunks, and urinating and defecating in apparent excitement. These greetings reinforce social bonds and may serve to exchange information about ranging plans, resource availability, or threats encountered. After the initial excitement, the groups may merge temporarily and travel together, or they may separate and continue on their respective paths. Encounters with other species are common. I share the landscape with a multitude of herbivores, including buffalo, giraffe, zebra, wildebeest, impala, and many others, and our interactions are generally neutral or even facilitative, as my feeding behavior opens up dense vegetation and creates grazing opportunities for smaller animals. I am largely indifferent to these species unless they startle me or approach my calf too closely. Predators, particularly lions, elicit strong reactions. If I detect the scent or sound of lions, I become alert, ceasing feeding and lifting my trunk to sample the air. If the threat is credible, the family groups together with calves in the center, and we may move away quickly, or, if the predator is visible and close, we may advance toward it, trumpeting and displaying aggression to drive it off. Interactions with other elephants outside my family are more complex. Bulls, especially those in musth, are treated with caution, as they can be unpredictable and aggressive. A musth male may approach our group, and the females typically assess him, sometimes allowing mating if one of us is in estrus. sometimes moving away if his behavior is too intense or if no female is receptive. Encounters between males are often tense, with much posturing, threat displays, and sometimes physical sparring. Serious fights are rare but can be lethal, as the combatants use their tusks as weapons, attempting to stab and topple each other. Across the seasons, my behavior and movements shift in response to changing resources. In the wet season, when grasses are green and water is abundant, we disperse more widely, and family groups may split temporarily into smaller subunits that exploit different patches of high-quality forage. Aggregations are smaller, and encounters with other families are less frequent. In the dry season, as water and forage become concentrated in a few key areas, we converge, and the landscape around permanent water sources becomes crowded with elephants and other wildlife. Competition increases, and dominance interactions become more common, with larger, more experienced families securing better access to resources. Reproduction is not strictly seasonal, but there are peaks in births that correlate with the timing of the rains, as females time their estrus cycles, and through the long gestation period, arrange for calves to be born when conditions are most favorable. A calf born at the onset of the wet season, when forage quality is high and water is plentiful, has a better chance of survival than one born in the dry season, when the mother may struggle to produce sufficient milk and the environment is harsh. This timing is not conscious planning, but the result of physiological mechanisms that link reproductive condition to environmental cues such as day length, rainfall, and nutrition. As I grow older, my role in the family evolves. If I am the daughter of the matriarch, I may eventually assume leadership when she dies or becomes too old to fulfill the role effectively. This transition is rarely abrupt, as I will have spent decades observing her decisions, learning the routes and resources, and participating in the coordination of group movements. My own reproductive success depends on my ability to navigate environmental challenges, maintain social bonds, and raise calves in a world increasingly shaped by human activities. Each calf I produce represents an enormous investment, not only of the nearly 2 years of gestation, but of the subsequent years of nursing, protection, and teaching, and my lifetime reproductive output, if I survive to old age, may be only a handful of offspring, perhaps 6 to 8 calves over a span of 40 to 50 years. The survival of those calves depends on the integrity of the family and the landscape. If my family is disrupted by poaching, if our ranging areas are fragmented by fences and settlements, or if drought depletes the resources we depend on, the likelihood that my calves will survive to adulthood diminishes. Conservation, therefore, is not simply about protecting individual elephants, but about maintaining the social structures and ecological processes that allow populations to persist and reproduce across generations. Elephants have long held a place in human culture, featured in art, mythology, religion, and literature across many societies. In some cultures, we are revered as symbols of wisdom, strength, and memory, while in others we are seen as dangerous pests or as sources of valuable ivory. These cultural perceptions influence conservation attitudes and policies, and efforts to protect elephants must navigate a complex landscape of values, interests, and competing priorities. In regions where elephants are seen as a source of pride and economic benefit through tourism, conservation support is generally strong. In regions where we are primarily associated with crop destruction and danger, support is weaker, and conservation success depends on finding ways to reduce conflict and share benefits equitably. The ivory trade remains a central issue in elephant conservation. Despite international bans, poaching continues, driven by demand in Asia, particularly in China and Southeast Asia, where ivory is carved into decorative objects and traditional medicine ingredients, though its use in traditional medicine is not supported by any pharmacological evidence. The economics of the illegal ivory trade are complex, involving international criminal networks, corruption, and poverty, and addressing the trade requires coordinated action across source, transit, and consumer countries, including law enforcement, demand reduction campaigns, and alternative livelihood programs for communities involved in poaching. In recent years, there has been growing interest in community-based conservation approaches that seek to align the interests of local people with elephant conservation by providing tangible benefits from the presence of wildlife. These programs include revenue sharing from tourism, employment in conservation activities, and support for coexistence strategies such as crop protection and compensation schemes. The effectiveness of these approaches varies, and success depends on genuine community participation, transparent and equitable governance, and sustained external support. Where such programs work well, they can reduce poaching and conflict, improve local attitudes toward elephants, and contribute to broader development goals. Climate change adds a new layer of complexity to elephant conservation. Shifts in rainfall patterns, increased frequency and severity of droughts, and changes in vegetation structure and composition all affect the resources we depend on. Droughts can lead to mass mortality events, especially when elephants are confined to small protected areas with limited water sources. Conversely, if climate change increases rainfall in some regions, it may create new habitat opportunities, though predicting these outcomes is difficult given the complexity of ecological systems and the multiple stressors they face. Adapting conservation strategies to account for climate change requires flexibility, long-term monitoring, and a willingness to revise management approaches as conditions change. Translocations, the capture and relocation of elephants from areas where they are in conflict with people, or where populations exceed the capacity of the habitat to another location, are sometimes used as a management tool. These operations are complex, expensive, and stressful for the elephants involved. Entire family groups should ideally be moved together to maintain social bonds, but logistical and financial constraints often prevent this. Translocations can be successful in establishing or supplementing populations, but they are not a solution to the underlying issues of habitat loss and human-elephant conflict, and they carry risks, including injury or death during capture and transport, failure of translocated elephants to adapt to new environments, and the potential for translocated elephants to return to their original ranges or come into conflict in their new locations. Another controversial management tool is culling, the deliberate killing of elephants to reduce population size. Culling was practiced in some southern African countries during the late 20th century when elephant populations in fenced reserves exceeded what managers believed the habitat could support, leading to concerns about habitat degradation and impacts on other species. Culling is highly controversial, raising ethical questions about human authority to kill animals for management purposes, concerns about the welfare of elephants, including the trauma experienced by survivors when family members are killed, and debates about whether culling is ecologically necessary or whether ecosystems can self-regulate or whether alternative management approaches, such as expanding habitat or removing fences, are preferable. Most countries have discontinued culling, but debates continue, and the question of how to manage elephant populations in restricted spaces remains unresolved. Contraception has been explored as a non-lethal alternative to culling. Immunocontraception, in which female elephants are treated with a vaccine that prevents pregnancy, has been tested in some populations and has been shown to reduce birth rates effectively. However, implementation is challenging, requiring repeated treatment of individual females, and the long-term demographic and social effects are not fully understood. Some research suggests that contraception may extend the dominance of older females by preventing the birth of daughters who would eventually assume leadership, potentially affecting the transfer of knowledge to younger generations. Contraception is best viewed as a tool for specific situations rather than a widespread solution, and it must be applied with careful monitoring and an understanding of its limitations. The study of elephants has a long history, dating back to the earliest natural historians, and modern research employs a diverse array of methods, including long-term behavioral observations, genetic analysis, satellite tracking, acoustic monitoring, and even the use of drones to survey populations and monitor habitat use. These studies have revealed the complexity of elephant society, cognition, and ecology, transforming our understanding and informing conservation practice. However, much remains unknown, particularly regarding the forest elephant, which is far more difficult to study due to the dense habitats it occupies and its elusive nature. Questions about the mechanisms of infrasound communication, the details of male social networks, the inheritance of migratory knowledge, and the impacts of environmental change on behavior and physiology are active areas of research. Elephants are increasingly observed and studied by the public through wildlife tourism, and this provides economic incentives for conservation, while also raising questions about disturbance and welfare. Well-managed tourism that limits the number of vehicles, maintains appropriate distances, and restricts noise and harassment can provide substantial revenue for conservation while having minimal impact on elephants. Poorly managed tourism, with excessive numbers of vehicles, close approaches, loud noises, and persistent following, can cause stress, disrupt behavior, and habituate elephants to humans in ways that may increase future conflict. Guidelines and regulations for wildlife viewing are essential, but enforcement is inconsistent, and balancing economic benefits with animal welfare and conservation objectives is an ongoing challenge. Captive elephants, used in zoos, sanctuaries, logging operations, and tourism, face distinct welfare issues. In captivity, we cannot express the full range of natural behaviors, including long-distance movement, complex social interactions within multi-generational families, and foraging across diverse habitats. Captive environments, even in the best zoos, are simplified and spatially restricted, and many elephants in captivity show signs of poor welfare, including stereotypic behaviors such as repetitive swaying, foot and joint problems from standing on hard surfaces, obesity or malnutrition from unnatural diets, and social stress from inappropriate groupings. The ethics of keeping elephants in captivity are debated, with some arguing that zoos contribute to conservation through education, research, and fundraising, while others contend that the welfare costs are too high and that resources would be better spent protecting wild populations and their habitats. Sanctuaries that provide larger, more naturalistic environments and that do not breed elephants or use them for entertainment represent a middle ground, though they too face challenges in meeting the complex needs of elephants. The cognitive and emotional lives of elephants continue to fascinate researchers and the public. Evidence suggests we possess self-awareness, as demonstrated by mirror self-recognition tests in which elephants investigate marks on their own bodies visible only in a mirror, a capacity shared with only a few other species, including great apes, dolphins, and magpies. We use tools, not extensively but in specific contexts, such as modifying branches to use as fly swatters or using objects to reach food or scratch ourselves. We cooperate in problem-solving tasks, coordinating actions with other elephants to achieve goals that cannot be accomplished individually, and we show sensitivity to the needs and knowledge states of others, suggesting a degree of theory of mind, the ability to attribute mental states to others, though this remains an area of active investigation and debate. Emotional expression is evident in our behavior. We show what appears to be joy during play and social reunions, distress when separated from family members or when confronted with danger, grief when companions die, and possibly empathy when responding to the distress of others. These observations are compelling, but interpreting them requires care. We cannot know the subjective experiences of elephants, and the terms we use to describe emotions are derived from human experience and may not map directly onto elephant experience. What we can say with confidence is that elephants display complex, flexible, and context-appropriate behaviors that suggest rich internal lives, and that understanding these behaviors is essential for effective conservation and welfare management. The vocal communication of elephants has been the subject of extensive research, revealing a communication system that is sophisticated and flexible. In addition to the rumbles and other vocalizations I have described, we produce calls that vary in structure depending on context, caller identity, and social situation. Contact calls maintain cohesion within the family, and these differ from alarm calls, which are higher in frequency and more abrupt, signaling immediate danger. Greeting rumbles are distinct from must rumbles or estrus calls, and individuals can modify their calls in response to the behavior of listeners, suggesting intentional communication rather than mere reflexive signaling. Research using playback experiments, in which recorded calls are broadcast to elephants and their responses are observed, has shown that we can distinguish between the calls of different individuals and that we respond appropriately to the information encoded in those calls, altering our behavior based on the identity and presumed location of the caller. Acoustic monitoring, in which arrays of microphones are deployed across the landscape to record elephant vocalizations continuously, has opened new avenues for studying elephant communication and movement. These systems can detect calls from many kilometers away, and by analyzing the timing and amplitude of calls received at different microphones, researchers can triangulate the positions of calling elephants and track their movements over time. This technology has revealed the extent of long-distance communication, the frequency with which families coordinate across space, and the responses of elephants to environmental events such as thunderstorms, which may signal the onset of rains and trigger movements toward distant wet season ranges. The role of matriarchs in decision-making has been studied through observations of natural behaviors and through experimental manipulations. In one classic study, researchers played recordings of lion roars to elephant families and measured their responses. Families led by older matriarchs responded more appropriately, forming defensive groups and orienting toward the sound source, whereas families led by younger matriarchs showed less coordinated and less effective responses, suggesting that experience and knowledge accumulate with age and directly influence survival-related decisions. Other research has examined how families decide when and where to move, revealing that decisions are often made collectively, with multiple individuals contributing through vocalizations and movements, but that the matriarch's preferences are disproportionately influential, likely because other group members have learned that her decisions have led to successful outcomes in the past. Elephants' interactions with their habitat extend beyond feeding and drinking, to include the creation of physical structures and landscape features. Elephant trails, worn into the ground by repeated passage, often follow the easiest routes through terrain, avoiding steep slopes and dense vegetation. These trails are used by other animals, including humans, and in some regions they have been formalized into footpaths and roads. Elephants also create wallows, shallow depressions in which we roll in mud or dust, and these wallows can collect water and support unique plant and animal communities. In forested habitats, elephants maintain clearings and glades by preventing tree regeneration through feeding and trampling, and these open areas provide habitat for species that require sunlight and low vegetation structure. The impact of elephants on tree populations is variable and context-dependent. In some ecosystems, we limit tree density and prevent woodland from becoming closed canopy forest, maintaining a savanna structure that supports high herbivore diversity. In other contexts, especially where our movements are restricted, we may kill large numbers of trees, leading to a shift from woodland to grassland. This transformation is not inherently good or bad, but represents a change in ecosystem state, and whether it is considered desirable depends on management goals and values. Some conservationists prioritize maintaining tree cover and the species that depend on it, while others emphasize the value of open habitats and the processes that create them. Recognizing that ecosystems are dynamic and that elephants are agents of change, not disruptors of a static ideal, is essential for ecological understanding and management. Fire interacts with elephant impacts in complex ways. In many African savannas, fire is a regular occurrence, ignited by lightning or by humans, and it consumes dry grass and kills or damages woody plants, limiting tree cover. Elephants and fire together can maintain open savannas, with each reinforcing the effects of the other. Where elephants are removed or populations decline, tree cover often increases, and fire patterns may change. Understanding these interactions is critical for managing ecosystems in a way that sustains the full range of native species and ecological processes. Water is the axis around which much of elephant life revolves, and our dependence on it shapes our spatial ecology, social dynamics, and interactions with other species. Permanent water sources, such as rivers, lakes, and springs, are focal points during the dry season, and the density of elephants around these sites can be very high. Competition for access to water can lead to aggression between families, and dominance hierarchies become more apparent as groups jostle for position at the water's edge. In some cases, elephants wait their turn, with subordinate families keeping their distance until dominant families have drunk and moved away. In other cases, confrontations occur, with threat displays, chases, and occasionally physical contact. The quality of water matters, and elephants discriminate between water sources, preferring clean, fresh water over stagnant or saline water when choice is available. However, when options are limited, we will drink from muddy pools, brackish seeps, or even dig our own wells to access groundwater. The ability to access subterranean water through digging is a critical survival skill in arid environments, and this behavior is often initiated by the matriarch, who remembers where digging has been successful in the past. Other elephants in the group and even other species watch and wait, benefiting from the water we make accessible. Elephants also play a role in nutrient cycling, moving nutrients across the landscape through our consumption of plants in one area and defecation in another. Because we range widely and our dung is produced frequently and in large quantities, we redistribute nutrients over considerable distances, affecting plant growth and soil chemistry. In some ecosystems, Nutrient hotspots develop around water sources or favored resting sites where elephants defecate repeatedly, and these areas support different plant communities than surrounding habitats. Conversely, areas where elephants remove nutrients through feeding without returning dung can experience nutrient depletion, though the significance of this effect at landscape scales is debated and likely varies with context. My sensory world is different from that of many other mammals, shaped by the demands of my ecology and the opportunities afforded by my size and structure. My vision is relatively poor, with limited acuity and color perception, and I rely less on sight than on smell and hearing to interpret my surroundings. I am thought to see the world in shades of blue and yellow, lacking the red-green discrimination that many primates possess, though research on elephant vision is limited, and these conclusions are tentative. My eyes are relatively small for my body size, positioned laterally on my head, providing a wide field of view but limited binocular overlap and depth perception. I rely more on my trunk to investigate objects up close, using touch and chemical cues to assess food quality, identify individuals, and navigate obstacles. My sense of smell is acute, among the best in the animal kingdom. The olfactory bulb in my brain is large, and the interior surface of my trunk is lined with millions of olfactory receptor cells. I can detect scents from many kilometers away, identifying water, ripe fruit, receptive females, rival males, predators, and danger. Smell is central to my social life, as chemical signals in urine, feces, temporal gland secretions, and genital secretions convey information about identity, reproductive status, health, and emotional state. When I meet another elephant, I use my trunk to sample these cues, touching the other's temporal gland, mouth, genitals, or urine, and I process this information to decide how to respond. Taste is also important, though less well studied. I can distinguish between plants that are nutritious and those that are toxic or unpalatable, and I show clear preferences for certain species and plant parts over others. These preferences are learned, passed down through generations as calves observe and imitate the feeding choices of their mothers and other group members. In this way, dietary knowledge is culturally transmitted, and different families or populations may have distinct feeding traditions even when living in the same habitat. Touch is a constant aspect of my life, from the pressure of my feet on the ground to the contact of my mother's trunk on my head, to the sensation of water cascading over my back. The skin of my trunk is especially sensitive, capable of detecting minute textures and temperatures, and I use it to explore the world with a precision that rivals the human hand. The soles of my feet are also highly sensitive, detecting vibrations and pressure changes, and this sensitivity is essential for both locomotion and communication, allowing me to detect the seismic signals generated by distant elephants or environmental events. My cognitive map of the landscape is built from these sensory inputs combined with memory, and it allows me to navigate efficiently across vast areas, often taking direct routes toward distant goals rather than wandering randomly. This ability has been demonstrated through tracking studies that show elephants traveling in straight lines toward water sources or other resources that are far beyond their sensory range at the start of the journey, suggesting they are using remembered locations rather than simply following immediate cues. How this spatial knowledge is encoded and retrieved, and how it is shared within the family, are questions that researchers continue to investigate using GPS tracking, behavioral observations, and experiments. The relationship between elephants and humans is being redefined in the modern era, as both populations grow and compete for space and resources. In some regions, Innovative approaches are being tested to reduce conflict and promote coexistence, including land use planning that designates corridors for elephant movement, agricultural practices that reduce crop attractiveness or protect fields more effectively, and economic incentives that reward communities for tolerating elephants rather than driving them away. These approaches recognize that conservation cannot succeed through enforcement and exclusion alone, but requires engaging people as partners, addressing their needs and concerns, and building systems that make coexistence economically and socially viable. Education and awareness play a role, as misunderstandings and fear can exacerbate conflict. In some areas, people believe that elephants are malicious or vengeful, targeting specific individuals or communities for harm, when in fact our behavior is driven by immediate needs for food and water, and by responses to perceived threats. Correcting these misconceptions and helping people understand elephant behavior can reduce unnecessary fear and hostility, though this must be coupled with practical measures to prevent crop raiding and protect human safety. Similarly, educating consumers in ivory markets about the impact of ivory consumption on elephant populations and the illegal nature of the trade is essential for reducing demand and supporting law enforcement efforts. Technology is increasingly used in elephant conservation and management, including GPS collars that transmit location data in real time, allowing researchers to monitor movements, identify ranging patterns, and detect when elephants approach human settlements or cross into conflict zones. Drones are used to survey populations, monitor habitat condition, and even to deter elephants from crops by creating noise or visual disturbance without causing harm. Camera traps automatically photograph elephants and other wildlife, providing data on population size, individual identification through unique features such as ear shape and tusk configuration, and behavior. Genetic analyses of dung samples provide information on population structure, relatedness, and the impacts of poaching on genetic diversity. These tools are powerful, but they are also expensive and require technical expertise and infrastructure, limiting their application in many regions where resources are scarce. Despite the challenges, there are reasons for cautious optimism. Some elephant populations have stabilized or increased in recent years due to improved protection, successful anti-poaching efforts, and habitat conservation. International cooperation on combating the illegal ivory trade has intensified, with countries enacting stronger laws, enhancing enforcement capacity, and collaborating across borders to disrupt trafficking networks. Public awareness of elephant conservation has grown, and there is widespread support for protecting elephants, though translating this support into effective action remains a challenge. The future of elephants depends on sustaining and expanding these efforts, on addressing the root causes of habitat loss and poaching, and on finding ways for humans and elephants to share the landscape in a manner that is sustainable for both. My own future, and that of my family, is uncertain. We live in a productive national park with reliable water and relatively good protection, but we are not immune to threats. Poachers occasionally penetrate the park, though they are less active now than in past decades. Droughts are becoming more severe, and the last one caused significant mortality, particularly among the young and the old. Our ranging area is bounded by agricultural lands, and we sometimes venture outside the park, leading to conflict with farmers and the risk of retaliatory killing. My matriarch mother is wise and experienced, and she has led us through many challenges, but she is aging, and in a few years the responsibility of leadership will fall to my older sister or perhaps to me, and I will need to draw on everything I have learned to ensure our survival. As I stand here in the cool of the evening, the sun setting behind the distant hills and the first stars beginning to appear, I am surrounded by my family. My younger brother plays nearby, mock-charging a startled warthog. My aunt rests beneath an acacia, her eyes half closed, and my mother stands a short distance away, her trunk lifted, testing the air. The landscape stretches out before us, a mosaic of grassland and woodland, shaped by the rains and the dry seasons, by fire and by the feeding of countless herbivores, including us. We are part of this system, both shaped by it and shaping it, and our continued presence here depends on the resilience of the ecosystem and on the choices made by the people with whom we share this land. In the morning, we will move again, following the routes known to my mother and her mother before her, seeking the resources we need to survive and raise the next generation. We will feed and drink and rest and play, and we will face the challenges that come, whether drought or predators or the encroachment of human activities. We will rely on each other, on the bonds that hold our family together, and on the knowledge accumulated over lifetimes and passed down through observation and imitation. This is the life of an elephant, shaped by deep history and by the immediate demands of survival, lived in the present but connected to the past, and to the future through the generations that have come before and those that will, if we are fortunate, come after. The night deepens, and the sounds of the savannah shift. The cicadas' buzz fades, replaced by the calls of nightjars and the distant roar of a lion, a sound that brings an instant of alertness to our group before we settle again. We move closer together, and I stand near my mother, drawing comfort from her presence and from the warmth of my family surrounding me. This is where I belong, part of this ancient lineage, part of this landscape, an elephant among elephants in a world that is both timeless and rapidly changing. And my life, for all its uncertainty, is woven into the fabric of this place and this moment. The complexity of our social bonds becomes even more apparent as I observe the interactions within and between families over extended periods. The relationships we maintain are not limited to our immediate family, but extend to a broader network of related and familiar elephants, creating a multi-layered social structure that researchers have termed a fission fusion society. Family units remain the core, but these units are not isolated. We recognize and remember the members of other families, particularly those with whom we share kinship or long histories of association. And when we encounter these familiar groups, our greetings are warm and prolonged, marked by rumbles, touching, and synchronized movements. In contrast, encounters with unfamiliar elephants, especially those from distant regions or different populations, are more cautious, with careful assessment and sometimes displays of dominance or submission, depending on the relative size and confidence of the groups involved. This recognition of kinship and social familiarity has profound implications for our social organization. Research using genetic analyses and long-term observations has revealed that families often consist of closely related females, typically sisters, mothers, daughters, and aunts, all descended from a common matriarch in previous generations. When these matriarchs die and families grow large, they may split, with sisters or cousins forming separate units that maintain close associations, traveling together frequently and coordinating movements across the landscape. These clusters of related families form what are sometimes called bond groups or clans, and they represent an intermediate level of social organization between the family unit and the population as a whole. The bonds between families within a clan are maintained through regular association, shared ranging areas, and mutual aid, such as cooperative defense against predators or assistance in accessing resources during difficult times. At an even broader scale, Clans are nested within populations, and populations may show some degree of genetic and social structuring, though the boundaries are often diffuse and permeable. Elephants within a population may recognize each other through familiarity and shared experience, and they navigate a social landscape in which status, kinship, and history all play roles in determining the nature and outcome of interactions. This social complexity rivals that of primates and cetaceans, and it underscores the cognitive demands of elephant life, requiring memory for hundreds of individuals, the ability to track relationships and histories, and the flexibility to adjust behavior in response to the social context. The transfer of knowledge across generations is central to elephant culture, a term that researchers use with care, defining it as socially learned behaviors that vary between groups and that are transmitted from one generation to the next through observation and imitation, rather than through genetic inheritance alone. Evidence for culture in elephants includes regional differences in vocal dialects, with families in different areas producing calls with distinct acoustic features, variations in foraging techniques, such as preferences for certain plant species or methods of processing food, and differences in ranging behavior, including the routes taken during migration and the timing of movements between habitats. These variations cannot be fully explained by environmental differences or genetic factors, and instead reflect learned traditions passed down within families and clans. Documenting culture in wild animals is challenging, requiring long-term data on behavior, careful controls for ecological and genetic influences, and ideally direct observations of learning. In elephants, the most compelling evidence comes from studies tracking families over decades, showing that young elephants adopt the behaviors of their elders, that these behaviors persist even when individuals move to new environments, and that distinct traditions can coexist in the same habitat, maintained by different families with minimal exchange. The matriarch is the primary conduit for cultural transmission, as her decisions shape the experiences of all group members, but other adults also contribute by modeling behaviors and by intervening to guide the learning of younger elephants. The loss of matriarchs and experienced adults through poaching or other mortality not only reduces population size, but also erodes this cultural knowledge, potentially impairing the ability of surviving elephants to respond to environmental challenges. This cultural erosion is an underappreciated impact of human-induced mortality, and it may have long-lasting consequences that persist even if populations recover numerically. Protecting older individuals and maintaining intact family structures are therefore priorities for conservation, not only for demographic reasons, but also to preserve the knowledge systems that underpin elephant societies. Foraging strategies demonstrate the diversity of techniques that elephants employ to extract nutrients from a wide variety of plant resources. Grasses are consumed by grasping tufts with the trunk and pulling them from the ground, often shaking or beating them to remove soil and roots before consumption. Leaves and small branches are stripped from trees and shrubs with the trunk, sometimes using a sweeping motion that collects multiple stems simultaneously. Bark is particularly nutritious, rich in minerals and secondary compounds, and obtaining it requires more effort. I use my tusks to score the bark, creating an opening, and then I insert my tusks beneath the bark and pry upward, peeling away strips that I then chew thoroughly. Some trees, particularly baobabs and certain acacias, have thick, fibrous bark that is highly valued, and these trees often show extensive scarring from repeated elephant feeding. Fruits are seasonal but highly prized when available, and elephants can detect ripe fruit from considerable distances using olfaction. We shake trees to dislodge fruits, pick them directly from branches, and gather fallen fruits from the ground. Many fruits have hard seeds that pass through our digestive system intact, and germination rates for some species are actually enhanced by gut passage, as the seed coat is scarified by digestive acids and enzymes. This mutualistic relationship benefits both the plant, which gains seed dispersal and enhanced germination, and the elephant, which gains a concentrated source of energy and nutrients. Roots and tubers are excavated using tusks and feet, and this behavior is particularly common during dry seasons when above-ground vegetation is sparse and desiccated. Some plants, such as certain palms and sedges, store reserves underground, and these subterranean resources provide critical nutrition when other foods are unavailable. Excavating roots can be laborious, requiring sustained digging and displacement of soil, but the energy gained often justifies the effort, especially for experienced elephants who have learned where productive plants grow. Mineral intake is managed through the consumption of soil at specific sites, known as mineral licks or salt licks, and also through the selection of plants that accumulate particular minerals. Sodium is often limiting in herbivore diets, as plant tissues are generally low in this element, and elephants actively seek sodium-rich sources. In some regions, elephants visit caves or exposed geological strata where mineral salts are available, and they use their tusks to break off chunks of mineral-rich rock or soil, which they then chew and swallow. The importance of these sites is evident in the frequency of visits and in the extensive excavations that develop over time, sometimes creating large caverns or deep pits. Water intake is not only about drinking, but also about the water content of food. Succulent plants, such as certain euphorbias and aloes, contain high water concentrations, and elephants consume these plants during dry periods to supplement their hydration. However, these plants often contain toxic or irritant compounds, and we must balance the benefit of water against the risk of toxicity. Experience and learning play roles here, as young elephants observe which plants are safe to eat and in what quantities, and they avoid species that their elders avoid, even if those plants are abundant and superficially attractive. The impact of poaching on elephant societies extends beyond the immediate loss of individuals to encompass disruptions of social structure, loss of knowledge, and long-term demographic consequences. When poachers target large-tusked individuals, they disproportionately kill older females, the matriarchs and experienced adults who hold social groups together, and who possess the knowledge essential for navigating environmental variability. The removal of these individuals can lead to the fragmentation of families, with surviving members forming smaller, less stable groups that may lack experienced leadership. Orphaned calves, especially those too young to survive independently, face high mortality, and even those that survive may suffer from reduced growth, delayed maturity, and impaired reproductive success due to the stress and nutritional deficits associated with losing their mothers. In populations subjected to intense poaching, the age structure shifts toward younger individuals, and this demographic skew has cascading effects on behavior and ecology. Young elephants, lacking the guidance of experienced adults, may make poor decisions regarding movement, resource use, and threat response, leading to higher mortality and reduced reproductive output. There is evidence from some heavily poached populations of increased aggression, altered social dynamics, and even instances of abnormal behavior, such as young males attacking other species, including rhinoceroses, in what some researchers have interpreted as a consequence of disrupted socialization and the absence of older males who would normally provide social control and mentorship. These interpretations remain debated, and attributing causation in complex social systems is fraught with difficulty. But the observations underscore the potential for poaching to have far-reaching and unexpected effects. Recovery from poaching is possible if pressure is reduced and if sufficient breeding adults survive to rebuild the population, but recovery is slow due to our long reproductive cycle. A female elephant does not reach sexual maturity until her early teens. Gestation lasts nearly 2 years, and interbirth intervals average 4 to 5 years or longer, meaning that each female produces offspring at a rate far below that of most mammals. Population growth rates are therefore low, typically 1 to 3% per year under good conditions, and recovery from severe depletion can take decades even in the absence of further mortality. Moreover, if the genetic diversity of the population has been reduced by selective poaching, the long-term viability may be compromised, as reduced genetic variation limits the ability of the population to adapt to changing environmental conditions and increases susceptibility to diseases and inbreeding depression. Conservation genetics, the application of genetic tools to conservation problems, has become an important component of elephant research and management. Genetic analyses of dung, tissue, or blood samples provide insights into population structure, gene flow, relatedness, and effective population size, informing decisions about where to focus protection efforts, how to manage fragmented populations, and whether to intervene with translocations or other measures to maintain genetic connectivity. In some cases, genetic data have revealed that populations thought to be continuous are actually subdivided into genetically distinct units with limited exchange, suggesting that habitat corridors or other connectivity measures may be needed to facilitate gene flow and prevent local inbreeding. The application of molecular techniques has also enhanced our understanding of elephant evolutionary history and taxonomy. As mentioned earlier, African bush elephants and African forest elephants were long considered subspecies of a single species, Loxodonta africana, but genetic evidence accumulated over the past 2 decades has demonstrated that they are as genetically distinct from each other as Asian elephants are from either African species, supporting their recognition as separate species. Loxodonta africana for the bush elephant and Loxodonta cyclodes for the forest elephant. This taxonomic revision has implications for conservation, as it means that forest elephants, which have suffered even more severe declines than bush elephants, require separate management attention, and that the total number of African elephant species is 2, not 1, altering assessments of extinction risk and conservation priorities. The evolutionary history of elephants stretches back millions of years, and our lineage, the Proboscidea, was once far more diverse than the 3 species alive today. Proboscideans originated in Africa during the Paleocene or Eocene, more than 50 million years ago, and they radiated into a multitude of forms, ranging in size from small, pig-sized animals to giants larger than any living elephant. They spread across every continent except Australia and Antarctica, adapting to environments from tropical forests to Arctic tundra. Mammoths, perhaps the most famous extinct proboscideans, were closely related to Asian elephants and survived until as recently as 4,000 years ago on isolated Arctic islands, overlapping with early human civilizations. Mastodons, Gomphothers, Stegodons, and many other lineages flourished and then disappeared, victims of climate change, habitat shifts, and in the most recent cases, human hunting. We are the survivors, the remnants of a once great radiation, and our fate is now intertwined with the decisions and actions of a single species, Homo sapiens, whose expansion and domination of the planet have transformed the context in which we live. Elephants and humans have interacted for hundreds of thousands of years, and evidence of this relationship extends deep into prehistory. Early humans hunted elephants and their extinct relatives, as evidenced by archaeological sites where bones, tusks, and stone tools are found in association, indicating butchery and consumption. Cave paintings and rock art from Africa, Europe, and Asia depict elephants and mammoths, suggesting that these animals held cultural significance for early human societies. In some regions, elephant hunting may have contributed to the extinction of proboscidean species, though disentangling the effects of human predation from those of climate change and habitat transformation is difficult and remains a subject of scientific debate. In more recent millennia, elephants have been domesticated in Asia, used for labor, transport, warfare, and ceremonial purposes for at least 4,000 years and possibly longer. The Asian elephant is the species typically used in captivity, as it is somewhat more tractable than African elephants, though African elephants have also been trained and used historically, including by the Carthaginian general Hannibal in his famous crossing of the Alps with war elephants during the Second Punic War. Domestication of elephants is not true domestication in the genetic sense, as captive breeding is rare, and most captive elephants are captured from wild populations, but it represents a long history of human control and use of elephants, with profound implications for elephant welfare and conservation. Today, the relationship between elephants and humans is dominated by conservation challenges and conflicts, but there are also emerging opportunities for coexistence and collaboration. Community-based conservation, in which local people are engaged as stewards and beneficiaries of wildlife, has shown promise in some contexts, creating incentives for tolerance and protection rather than persecution. Payment for ecosystem services, in which communities are compensated for maintaining habitats that support elephants and other wildlife, is being tested in various regions, with mixed results depending on governance, transparency, and equity in distribution of benefits. Ecotourism, when well managed and when benefits accrue to local communities, can provide substantial income and create constituencies for conservation, though it also carries risks of disturbance, habituation, and displacement of local people from traditional lands. Legal protections for elephants vary widely across their range. In some countries, elephants are fully protected under national law, with hunting and killing prohibited except under specific circumstances such as self-defense or management actions authorized by wildlife authorities. In other countries, protections are weaker or poorly enforced, and elephants are killed with impunity. International trade in ivory and other elephant products is regulated under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, commonly known as CITES, which has banned international commercial trade in elephant ivory since 1989 for African elephants, and has imposed restrictions on trade in Asian elephant products. However, domestic ivory markets persist in some countries, and illegal international trade continues, facilitated by corruption, weak law enforcement, and high demand. Demand reduction, efforts to decrease consumer desire for ivory and other elephant products, is increasingly recognized as a critical component of conservation strategy. Campaigns in major consumer countries, particularly in Asia, aim to raise awareness of the links between ivory consumption and elephant poaching, to shift social norms so that ivory ownership is seen as undesirable or shameful rather than prestigious, and to promote alternative materials and cultural practices. The effectiveness of demand reduction campaigns is difficult to measure, and changes in consumer behavior can be slow. But there is evidence that attitudes are shifting, particularly among younger generations, and that demand for ivory has declined in some markets, contributing to reductions in poaching pressure in some regions. Anti-poaching efforts, the on-the-ground work of protecting elephants from illegal killing, involve a range of strategies, from armed patrols and ranger training to intelligence gathering, prosecution of traffickers, and community engagement. Rangers, often called game scouts or wildlife officers, are the frontline of elephant protection, patrolling protected areas on foot, by vehicle, and increasingly by aircraft, detecting and deterring poachers, removing snares, and collecting data on elephant populations and threats. This work is dangerous, and many rangers have been killed in confrontations with poachers, who are often well-armed and may be part of organized criminal networks. Supporting ranger welfare, providing adequate equipment, training, and salaries, and recognizing their contributions are essential for effective conservation. Technology is enhancing anti-poaching efforts in various ways. GPS collars on elephants provide real-time location data, allowing rapid responses when collared individuals move into high-risk areas or when their movements suggest they have been injured or killed. Drones equipped with cameras and thermal sensors survey large areas quickly, detecting poachers, monitoring wildlife, and providing evidence for prosecutions. Acoustic sensors detect gunshots and transmit alerts to ranger teams, enabling rapid deployment to the site of a suspected poaching incident. DNA forensics, the analysis of genetic material from seized ivory, can trace ivory back to the geographic origin of the elephants from which it was taken, helping to identify poaching hotspots and trafficking routes, and linking different seizures to the same criminal networks. These tools are powerful, but they are only as effective as the systems in which they are embedded, and success depends on adequate funding, trained personnel, effective governance, and political will to combat wildlife crime. The role of local communities in elephant conservation cannot be overstated. In many parts of Africa, elephants range across landscapes that are inhabited and used by people, and the attitudes and actions of these people determine whether elephants persist or disappear. Top-down conservation models that exclude people and impose restrictions without consultation or compensation have often failed, generating resentment and resistance, and in some cases driving people to support poaching or to actively kill elephants in retaliation for crop damage or perceived injustices. In contrast, participatory approaches that involve communities in decision-making, that recognize and respect local rights and knowledge, and that share benefits equitably have greater potential for long-term success, though they are more complex and demanding to implement. Land tenure, the systems by which land is owned, managed, and used, is a critical factor in conservation outcomes. In some regions, elephants range across communal lands or indigenous territories, and the people living on these lands have traditional practices and institutions for managing wildlife. Recognizing and supporting these systems, while also providing resources and assistance to address new challenges such as increased human populations and changing livelihoods, can enhance conservation while also supporting human well-being. In other regions, elephants are confined to state-owned protected areas, and the challenge is to maintain these areas as secure refuges, while also managing the interfaces with surrounding human-dominated landscapes to minimize conflict and maintain connectivity. Corridors, strips of habitat that connect larger patches and allow elephants and other wildlife to move between them, are increasingly recognized as essential for conservation in fragmented landscapes. Elephants require large areas and seasonal access to different habitats, and when they are confined to isolated protected areas, they may deplete resources, experience increased competition and social stress, and suffer from genetic isolation. Corridors provide routes for movement, allowing elephants to access wet season and dry season ranges, to escape from overpopulated areas, and to maintain genetic exchange between populations. Establishing and maintaining corridors requires securing land, managing human activities along the corridor route, and ensuring that elephants can move safely without coming into conflict with people. This is challenging and expensive, involving negotiations with landowners, compensation for loss of land use, and ongoing management and monitoring. Climate change is adding complexity to elephant conservation, as shifting rainfall patterns, increasing temperatures, and more frequent extreme weather events such as droughts and floods alter the habitats and resources that elephants depend on. Predicting how elephants will respond to climate change is difficult, as it depends on the magnitude and speed of environmental changes, the capacity of elephants to adapt through behavioral plasticity or physiological adjustments, and the extent to which human land use constrains their ability to shift ranges or alter behaviors. Some models suggest that climate change will reduce suitable habitat for elephants in parts of their range, forcing them into smaller, more marginal areas where conflict with humans may intensify. Other models suggest that in some regions, increased rainfall could expand available habitat, though this depends on complex interactions between climate, vegetation, and land use. Adapting conservation strategies to climate change requires flexibility and a willingness to revise approaches as conditions evolve. This may include expanding protected areas to encompass climate refugia, areas that are likely to remain suitable as conditions elsewhere deteriorate, investing in corridors and connectivity to allow elephants to track shifting resources, supporting adaptive management frameworks that allow for rapid adjustments in response to monitoring data, and integrating climate considerations into land use planning and development decisions. It also requires recognizing uncertainty and avoiding rigid plans that assume stable conditions, instead building resilience and capacity to respond to surprises and novel challenges. The concept of rewilding, the restoration of ecosystems to more natural states through the reintroduction of species and the restoration of ecological processes, has gained attention in conservation circles, and elephants are sometimes proposed as candidates for reintroduction into areas where they have been extirpated. In some cases, such as parts of southern Africa where elephants were hunted out but where suitable habitat remains, reintroductions have been successful, reestablishing populations and restoring ecological functions. In other cases, particularly in regions where human populations are now dense and land uses have intensified, reintroduction is not feasible or desirable, as it would generate conflict and suffer from the same challenges that elephants face in existing populations. Assessing the potential for rewilding requires careful evaluation of ecological suitability, human dimensions, and the availability of resources to support and manage reintroduced populations over the long term. Elephants continue to inspire scientific research across diverse disciplines, from ecology and behavior to physiology and cognition, from genetics to conservation biology. Long-term studies, some spanning more than 4 decades, have provided unparalleled insights into elephant life histories, social dynamics, and population processes, and these studies serve as models for research on other long-lived, socially complex species. Comparative research, examining similarities and differences between elephant species and between elephants and other large-brained social animals such as primates, cetaceans, and social carnivores, illuminates the evolution of intelligence, communication, and culture, and contributes to broader understanding of the diversity of life and the processes that shape it. The ethical dimensions of elephant conservation and management are increasingly the subject of discussion and debate. Questions about the moral status of elephants, whether they have rights or interests that should be recognized and protected, the extent to which humans have obligations to conserve elephants and their habitats, and how to balance the needs and rights of elephants with those of people, particularly those who are poor and whose livelihoods are affected by elephants, are complex and do not have simple answers. Different ethical frameworks, whether utilitarian, rights-based, or virtue-oriented, lead to different conclusions about what should be done, and navigating these differences requires dialogue, respect for diverse perspectives, and a commitment to finding solutions that are both ethically defensible and practically achievable. One emerging area of ethical concern is the welfare of wild elephants, a concept that extends beyond conservation, which focuses on populations and ecosystems, to consider the well-being of individual animals. Welfare science provides tools for assessing the physical and psychological states of animals, including measures of stress hormones, behavior, health, and body condition. And applying these tools to wild elephants is challenging but increasingly feasible. Questions about whether elephants in human-modified landscapes experience reduced welfare, whether certain management practices such as culling or translocation cause suffering, and how to weigh the welfare of individuals against conservation goals for populations are active areas of inquiry and debate. The future of elephants is uncertain, and while there are reasons for hope, there are also serious grounds for concern. The trajectory will be determined by the choices made by governments, conservation organizations, local communities, and individuals around the world, and by the interactions between human activities, ecological processes, and the resilience and adaptability of elephants themselves. No single action or approach will ensure elephant survival, but a combination of strengthened protection, habitat conservation and restoration, conflict mitigation, demand reduction, community engagement, and adaptive management, all supported by robust science and informed by ethical reflection, offers the best chance for securing a future in which elephants continue to roam the landscapes of Africa and Asia, shaping ecosystems and inspiring wonder as they have for millions of years. As I move through the world each day, I am largely unaware of these larger human concerns and debates, focused instead on the immediate demands of finding food and water, maintaining social bonds, caring for young, and avoiding threats. My life is lived in the present, shaped by instincts honed over evolutionary time and by knowledge gained through experience and learning. Yet my future and that of my kin are bound to the decisions and actions of humans, and whether the next generation of elephants will have the space and resources to thrive depends on whether humans choose to make room for us in an increasingly crowded and altered world. I continue to follow my mother's lead as our family moves across the savannah in the gathering dusk, heading toward a waterhole several kilometers away where we will drink and rest for the night. The air cools and the sounds of the day give way to those of the night, the chirping of crickets, the calls of nightjars, and the distant laughter of hyenas. My calf stumbles slightly in the fading light, and I reach out with my trunk, steadying her and guiding her forward. She leans into me, and we walk together, part of an unbroken line stretching back through generations to the ancestors who walked these same paths, and hopefully forward to descendants who will do the same, carrying with them the knowledge and traditions that define what it means to be an elephant.